let's get started right away because I know everybody is busy and wants to get their lives going. And the first presentation of today is by myself. My name is Daniel. For those of you who don't know me, I am one of the members of AmeriVox together with Daniele, Patricia, and Viviana. And I've been a translator for about, 18 years now, and an interpreter for about 14. I have a master's of conference interpreting. I'm also a sworn translator, and my areas of expertise are IT, finance, and legal. I've dabbled in a bunch more, but those are the three main ones. And the topic of today's session, as you know, is online privacy and security. And I will start right away with my presentation about it, which is called The Basics of Basics. And I'll explain why it's called that in a moment. I will just share my screen here. Let's see if it works. There you go. I believe it works. Can you guys see my screen? Okay, I'll just assume it if you can't.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So the presentation for today is called The Basics of Basics. And I'm talking here specifically about privacy and security online. And it is really, really, really just the basics. I am not going to go into a lot of detail here. I'm not going to go into very specifics into how each of those things work. I just want to show you two things that are very, very basic that I think everybody should do. And a quick disclaimer here, I am not here to give you tips that will make your computer impregnable or that will make you 100% secure, even because there is no such thing as 100% security. What I'm going to teach you today is basically the equivalent of, like, don't drive your car into the city center or downtown and leave your door open with your laptop and your identity and your passport inside. I'm just going to talk today about the digital equivalent of that. It is, like I said, very, very basic. And it's anywhere else in your lives, it's things that you would never have to be told to do. You would just do it. But then you might ask, why am I just talking about the basics today? And the reason for that is very simple. The reason I'm going to talk about just the basics today is because all of you are lazy bastards and you don't do the basics. When it comes to digital security and online privacy, people do not do the basic stuff. They don't do the basic because either they don't think it's that basic, they think that they're already doing the basic, that's the most common reason, or basically they're too lazy, or they just don't feel like it because it's a lot of work and I have all my systems set up and I don't want to change it. But you have to change it. You have to do it. And this is the main thing I want to show you today. Oh, by the way, let me just stop real quick and say one thing. I demand questions. I want questions at the end to answer. Type them in chat if you want. Ask you use the floor if you prefer. There is going to be time at the end for questions, and I want you to have questions. Also, importantly, the questions do not have to be just about what I'm talking about here. I'm going to talk about two specific things, but if you want to talk about anything else related to online privacy and security, everything from what's the best way to sync my files, or, oh, if I use machine translation, are people reading my translations? Anything, it all goes, okay? So have questions about security and ask them at the end, not optional. So anyway, now that we established you're all lazy bastards, let's talk a little bit about the two things I want to talk to you about today, which are really the basics of basics on online privacy and security. And those are password management and two-factor authentication. And I know you guys have probably heard of this before, but I'm willing to bet that some of you do not do these things proper. I am actually willing to bet that most of you probably do not do those two things the best way you could be doing them. And so this is what I'm going to talk about today: how to do password management the right way and how to do two-factor authentication the right way. And here is what I usually hear from people when I talk about password management. They say things like, oh, I save all my passwords in Chrome. That's fine. I have different passwords. They're all saved in my browser, just complete for me. It's password management. Chrome is managing my passwords for me. Or I have a system. I use one symbol for one service, and then I use a different number for another service. And I use similar words that are not the same, but they're close enough that I can remember them. So it's easy to remember, and I can build sort of a puzzle little bit of password like that. And then I mix and match, and it works for me. And okay. Or I add different symbols and numbers to my password, like you have one base password and you keep adding different numbers or different symbols to that base password. And then that way you have different passwords for different services. And these are all big no, no, no. No, no, no. Guys, this is not password management. This is not the best way to go about managing your passwords. So if you were doing those things and you thought you were doing password management, let me just replay the video again because I love how judgmental she looks. No, that's not password management. Have your little system with different symbols and numbers, have something like a base password and adding one or two symbols. Oh, Pachi, your microphone's off. There you go. Okay. So going back once more, just having a base password and adding your name or a number or a symbol to it for each service, or do a little system where you put one number here, one letter there. Those things are not proper password management. And I know it looks like it, but it's not. And the reason why is because for years and years and years, these websites that we use have been attacked and passwords have been stolen. And a lot of the times the passwords were completely in the open, no encryption whatsoever, no form of hashing, nothing to make sure that these passwords are not easily discoverable. And what happened to that is that these password lists of people's passwords that they use in websites are like, they work like translation memories in a way, in that every time somebody changes a password or gets a password stolen, this gets stored in a database, and people use those databases to train the systems that try to decrypt your passwords for common passwords. So imagine there is a translation memory with literally billions with a B, billions of translation units. And you are trying to see a common password from that. So because those translation memories are now full of billions of passwords, hundreds of millions of people who use those systems that you were using, like, again, use a base word and add a couple of numbers to it, or get a couple of words and put them together. Everybody does it. And because everybody does it, the people who are breaking your passwords are very, very, very adept at getting people who use those systems as well. If one of your passwords gets stolen and it pops up on a list of stolen passwords somewhere, and you use this system, there's a very, very high likelihood that the person who's trying to break into your other websites will have an idea of trying the different passwords that you use with your system. It's like machine learning, but for passwords. And if you're wondering how many passwords get stolen all the time, it's a lot, and it's getting worse. Here is a list of headlines that I collected from one website that I read called Ars Technica. And you can see here that this is a number of cyber attacks that we have had over time. And I don't know how big the font is to you, and I don't know if you can read this clearly, But this is not over years and years and years. This all happened in the last 3 months. 3 months. And how long has this been happening? For many, many, many years. I read this article talking about a password breach that happened on LinkedIn. And it was 60 million passwords. And it was all decryptable. It was all possible to actually get to the real actual passwords. And this guy was talking about how LinkedIn's password sloppiness hurts everybody. And he's already talking about what I'm telling you today. And he was talking about it in 2016. So 6 years ago, people were already saying, don't use little password systems. Don't use little rules for your password. People will guess them. They will guess, if you get one password stolen, they will guess all of the others. And again, this was 6 years ago. Imagine how worse things are today. That's why you need password management. You need password management, and you need proper password management. That is step numero uno. You have to do it. So what makes a password manager a proper password manager? 3 things. It needs to be dedicated, not like Chrome that does browsing and password management, not like your other app that also has a password manager. It has to be a dedicated password manager. It has to be cross-platform. It needs to work on your cell phone, on your computer, on your browser, in Windows, in macOS, in Linux, and Android, and iOS, and whatever you use. And it must be easy to use. And that one is very necessary because, once again, going back to my slide before, you're all lazy bastards. And if it's not easy to use, you guys are just not going to use it. So how do they work? There are many different options. This is one slide that I got from a website called Expert Insights. They looked into a bunch of these. There are many versions depending on what you need, what type of features you want. But my rule of thumb is, if you want something free, like the cheap and cheerful, go to Bitwarden. And if you need something more robust and paid, if you're going to pay money for it, go 1Password. 1Password for me is the best service, in my opinion, okay? But this varies. It is the service I use. It is incredibly secure. It has never been breached. There has never been a cyber attack on, at least that anybody knows of, on 1Password, which is very rare. It doesn't mean that they're better than everybody else, but it just never happened, which means they have great security. And the easy to use part, amazing. Very easy to use 1Password. The little details that make your life easier are super well thought out. It's incredibly user-friendly, and it's gorgeous. And I think gorgeous software is good. Fun fact, actually, Apple tried to buy 1Password a few years ago, and they were like, nope, thank you very much. We do one thing and one thing well, and that's what we want to do. And Apple instead just pay for all of its employees to use 1Password. So I'm using 1Password here as an example, but all password managers will work the same way. What a password manager does is it creates a vault. It creates a sort of safe where it stores all your passwords for you, and you don't have to remember them at all. You only have to remember one password. That's why the name is 1Password. And they call this the master password. You set it up once, you create it, and that master password gets joined with what they call a security key. I don't know if you can see here, maybe it's not big enough on your screen, but they all will give you like an emergency kit or a recovery kit or a sign-up kit, which is basically your email, sometimes a server if it's cloud-based, and a security key, which is a very big, very annoying to type number. And then they're going to ask you to print it and put it somewhere in your house, because that security key and your master password are the only ways to set up on each device. All of them will do this. All of them will give you a master password and a security key, and you need to have both. The master password, you will never forget because you will type it every single day of your life, but only once. And then it unlocks all your other passwords. And then everything that you do in your life gets filled automatically. If you go to Chrome, it fills in your password automatically. If you are on your cell phone and you have one password, you go to a website, it's going to hook up to your fingerprint or your Face ID. So it identifies you, fills the username for you, fills the password for you, and logs in. If you use Chrome, you can install a Chrome extension, Firefox, Edge, Safari, whatever you use, there's going to be a password manager app that integrates with that and fills it up for you. And the next step, once you have this set up, is you need to go to your, once you have this all password management solution set up, every time you log in, it's going to say, hey, I noticed that you're logging into this website and I don't have this password saved. Do you want me to save it? And you go like, yes, please. And then it just saves it in your vault, in your safe, and it's there forever. But what do you need to do? Well, because you were using your lazy password system before, every time you do this, you have to go to that website and go to that section that goes like, hey, can I change my password? Change your password. Because when you do that and you have your password manager not only will recommend to you automatically a super good, random, really long password, and you don't have to care what it is because you will never have to type it, but it also will save that password for you automatically. So that's proper password management. That's safe, basic thing, number one, that you have to do today. If you don't have a password management system, go get one immediately. Okay? Okay. Thing number two that you need to do immediately, if you don't have it already, for all the accounts that support it, is step two, two-factor authentication. If you're aware of password management of two-factor authentication it's basically in the name. And the two factors are always going to be something that you know, usually your password, and something that you have, like a device, or a code, or a fingerprint, or a text message because you have a phone line. So it's always something that you know and something that you have. So you use both things at the same time to authenticate. And there are three common forms of it. It's usually set up in the app. You go to your account. This is Instagram, just an example. And it gives you go to settings, and then you go to two-factor authentication, and you see something like this. And then it says require security code. And when you get to this place, there are several options of what you can do. It can be SMS, it can be an authentication app, and it can be a physical device as well. I actually really like 1Password for that as well. They did an update recently, and 1Password is now both a password management solution and a two-factor authentication solution. These applications will always show you a QR code to set up your two-factor authentication when you go to these options here on the screen. And you can tell 1Password, hey, I'm right here on my setup screen for 2FA, and there's this little QR code on my screen. Can you scan it? And it goes like, yeah, of course. And then gives you the code, and you paste that code, and it's set up forever. And the cool thing about doing this with your password manager is that your password manager will also type the code for you automatically. It's a beautiful thing. It's an amazing thing. It's lovely. And out of these three, SMS, which is the one they usually use to receive a code, your fingerprint or authentication app, or a physical device, you usually, if possible, want a physical device. Of these three, the physical device is the safest by far. If you have the choice to not use SMS, don't use SMS. SMS is the worst. It's very easy to intercept. It is easy for people to call your phone company, pretend to be you, and register a SIM card with your number in your name. It is very easy for people to do reverse social engineering and get the stacks from you. This is usually the way that people get to steal your credentials when they steal your phone on the street, for instance. So if you have SMS as your authentication method for two-factor authentication, don't have it. Disable it completely. Get an authentication app. There is Google Authenticator. There is a bunch of them. My favorite one is one called Authy, A-U-T-H-Y. I'm going to write it in chat right now. And it's the one that I like if I have to use it, but the device is much better because it's safer than all of the others and it's simpler to use. I'm going to give an example here. This is my actual computer. You're going to see an actual recording of my screen a couple of days ago when I was preparing this. And what I'm doing here is I'm using one password. See, to log in, it's going to fill in my username and my password. Boom. And then it shows up this warning because I set up this key before and it tells, hey, you need to use a security key. So I go to my security key, I just press the little button there, boop, and I'm logged in. This is two-factor authentication, and this is the safest form of two-factor authentication there is. It is the most expensive because you have to buy this little USB device just for that. But this, by the way, is impossible to phish. Phishing attacks don't work if you have two-factor authentication set up with a device like this. People cannot log into your account from another computer if the USB device is stuck to your computer. It's immune to phishing attacks. Okay, that is what I had for today. We have 5 minutes and I need questions.